I heard the gentlelady from California try to make a comparison between a balanced budget during the Clinton years with a $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. Those don't equate. In fact, from the CARES Act, $4 trillion to whatever we passed and whatever you're calling it in January, February, that was a spending bill last year, about $1.5 trillion. We just passed infrastructure bill about $1.2 trillion. Now we're looking at $3.5 to $4.5 trillion reconciliation bill. You know, all these promises are made that this is going to save our constituents money. Well, there's been false promises before. In fact, the Affordable Care Act promises were made that households and families would see their premiums go down, that medical expenses would go down, and actually the opposite happened. My constituents ended up paying more. We are $28+ trillion in debt. Heck, I can't even keep track of it because we keep adding more and more money on the backs of our grandchildren and their grandchildren. This amount of spending that we're seeing is alarming. And if Americans don't realize that the Democrats are wanting to spend more and more money that someone's going to have to repay. I was a businessman. I borrowed money. I had to repay that money. You know, Proverbs 22:7 says, the borrower is servant to the lender. God is warning us that you're in servitude when you borrow money until you get it paid back. Because servitude means that you can't spend that money to take your family to Disney World or other things because you're obligated to repay that money. That's what servitude is. And our nation is approaching $30 trillion in spending, in debt rather. And we've got to figure out what we're going to do to change the trajectory of our spending so that we don't have to continue borrowing money. And it's not by passing reconciliation bills that add $3.5 trillion more on the backs of our children, grandchildren, and future grandchildren. Do not compare this spending level with a balanced budget under the Clinton years, which actually balanced the budget, and we are in the black. And guess what? If we ever do that again, we can take that money that we are in the black, that surplus, and we start paying back our debt. Creditors require debt to be repaid, at least in the private sector, in the real world, not the bizarro fantasy world that we live in here inside the Beltway, where we spend trillions of dollars every year. Inflation's real. You heard the gentleman from Indiana talk about it. Gasoline prices are up over double what they were a year ago. Hamburger, bacon, toilet paper, basic staples for the home, cleaning supplies, everything, assuming you can find it based on the supply chain issues. There's a lot of reasons that supply chain issues face us here today, but spending $3.5 trillion of public money, stimulus, let's call it what it is. You're trying to stimulate the economy with public money after the federal government shut down our economy, required employers to space their employees 6 feet to 10 feet apart, limit the number of people that can be in certain square footage facilities. All of this exacerbated the supply chain issue because the widgets that were made here that have to go into this final product before it can be sent down the line to the grocer's shelves, we disrupted that. We disrupted it. The federal government disrupted it with mandates on employers to shut down during the pandemic. Throwing more public money, $3.5 trillion into the mix, is not going to change things. What we can do is get government out of the way and allow the private sector to rebound because the private sector knows how to do it. The private sector will do it if we quit taxing profits and vilifying success and allow those profits and dividends all to be reinvested into private industry to build physical plant, hire employees, keep those employees on the books. That's what worked. That's how a capitalist society works. Capitalism is actually a winning solution for rebounding from the pandemic. It's not more socialist spending and socialist government and socialist programs. That's what the Democrats put forward. That's what's costing Americans and future Americans for generations to come that are going to be saddled with this yoke of debt that you're adding on to them. And we need to alert the American people to the amount of debt that is being added on by the Democrats on the other side of the aisle with big spending bills like that. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.